Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Dr. Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Dr. Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner, share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Dr. Tina.
Our conversation today is with Jack Church from K-Love. Jack is a widower. Jack has 30 years of experience of walking on this journey. But what Jack also has is showing us how to hope again, how to walk back into the light, and entertain the possibility of love. Let's get into this conversation now. Hello, Jack. Welcome to the Widowhood.
Hey, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to join you. It really is.
So, for somebody that's listening and they're going, pleasure to join you to the Widowhood, like what would make you say that? What would be the backstory to say that's a welcoming?
Oh, the backstory. See, the front story was you're warm and inviting. So
okay.
That would be.
Okay, we'll stick with the front story. But as far as the backstory, I know a lot has happened in your life. Yes. So take us back to how the moment in your life shifted in the path that you're on now.
Oh, boy. Well, as you know, I lost my first wife of over 30 years in 2019. It was October of 2019. And for those of us that have experienced loss like that, it's incomprehensible the amount of grief that you will experience. I mean, it was hard. And, I was working in local television as a TV weather guy in Oregon at the time and was her full-time caregiver as well for about 8 months leading up to her passing. So I'm doing that in the day and the evening and doing the weather at night and praying that she's going to be fine. It didn't work out that way. So I lost her, and then I'm like, wow, this hurts way more than I ever thought it could. And I never will forget, Tina, I don't know why this popped in my head. She and I used to talk about which one of us would go first, and I now realize that I would say, well, hopefully I'll go first. I want you to live a full life. But now knowing the pain of the loss, it's like, that's an unfair statement. Mm-hmm. It really is, because it is so hard. I would never wish that upon anyone to go through this. But any of us that have been married for any length of time, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. I mean, it really is. Unless you go down in a plane crash or car crash, something like that, one of us in a relationship will experience that loss. And,
thank you for sharing that, Jack. Let's go back a little bit further. First of all, what is her name?
Oh, Pam. Her name is Pam. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And what was life meeting Pam and before her passing?
I met her in high school. It was actually, we went to two different high schools, two different counties. My dad had an industrial supply company. Her dad was a bivocational preacher, but he was also a purchasing agent for a local factory. And so my dad called on him, and they mentioned that, my parents had a son, Reverend Claude Prince said, well, I've got a daughter. And so the parents went out to dinner, and they said maybe they should meet.
You had an arranged relationship, basically.
Well, kind of. I mean, but the thing of it is, my parents gave me her number, and I waited like 6 months to ever call her. I was very shy. I was getting ready to be a senior in high school, and I finally called her. And our first date, I still remember, we went to Jackson, Tennessee. We saw the movie Star Wars, and we ate at a restaurant called Skeeter's. And it was just, it was kind of magical. I mean, she was great. We just had a lot of fun. We laughed a lot. We had fun. And we dated, and then roll forward though, senior year of high school, right? Senior prom night. And I'm getting ready to go off to college to Jackson, where we would go on our dates, which is like 40 miles from the town we lived in, which to high school kids, that seems like an eternity, right? And she wasn't sure what she was going to do. So I suggested on our prom night, I said, we probably should break up then, since I'm going to be going to Jackson. I know. We broke up.
What was her response?
Gosh, it's funny. I could probably cry thinking about it now. She was shattered. She was like, really? I went, well, yeah, I'm going to be in Jackson. You don't know where you're going to be. We probably should do this. Roll forward, though. The other thing that was different, she was a Christian. I was not a practicing Christian at the time, not really a true believer. So I think God had his hand in that as well, because sometimes I felt a little pressure because her dad was a preacher. She was very active in church. I wasn't. But when I went off to college, I started getting involved in church. I came to know the Lord. I became a Christian. And I found out that 2 years later, she was in the back of the church where I got baptized in Jackson, Tennessee. She had heard about my transformation. She was there. I then found out she had come down to go to college in the same town I was in. She was dating a guy, and I told her, I said, this guy's a loser. You need to be with me.
Oh, yeah, now Pam's with the loser now, 2 years later.
Well, now she found the winner, has returned, and we got married. Believe it or not, we got married 4 months later while still in college.
Okay, Jack, you mentioned that you weren't a believer when you met Pam. There are people from all walks of life listening to this podcast, and they're going, what do you mean not a believer? And what difference does it make if I was with Pam and I wasn't a believer? What does that mean? Can you share more details instead of just a statement that may not be familiar?
I'll do it in simple terms. It means a follower of Jesus Christ, believing that he died on the cross for our sins, and that if we believe in him, we will have eternal life with him in heaven. And I kind of believed it. I was a loose kind of Christian, casual Christian, but Pam was really into it, and it had been her life. And so when I accepted Christ, for the Christians who may be listening, there's a part of the Bible that talks about when you get married, you need to be evenly yoked. Okay. And by that, I mean, if you're both believers, it's going to be way easier. It just really is. Okay. And so once we were evenly yoked, we knew it was right. It just felt right. And we had a beautiful marriage. I mean, we really did. And I'm not looking at it through rose-colored glasses either, that looking back after she passed, it was great. We had people so many times tell us, you guys are amazing, because we moved a lot, because I was in television. We moved all over the country. We had 2 kids, and Pam was always just had a smile on her face. She'd go, okay, where are we going next? And it was great. It really was. I was truly blessed.
Thank you for sharing that. What would you say? So 30 years, and you mentioned I could still cry now about something that's happened that long. What are some misunderstandings for grief, particularly as it relates to men?
Yeah, I mean, crying, I don't think people, and even some women too I've talked to, don't realize there are healing properties in tears. I mean, there truly are. I mean, first couple of years after I lost her, I mean, I would just break down and cry hard. I mean, hard cries. And then I started realizing, man, I feel better after doing that. And there were times I would actually intentionally put on something I knew would make me cry because I felt like I needed to cry. It's like there was a series on Netflix called Afterlife with Ricky Gervais. And I always tell people the language incredibly rough in it. But it was a series, a 3-year series he did about where he had lost his wife. And he was my age. He was a younger guy. His wife was a younger woman, lost her. And the series so resonated with me, his thoughts, his feelings, his actions. And so I would go back and I would watch episodes of that I knew were particularly hard to watch. And they would make me cry. And then I would just feel better. I mean, it really is. If there's any men listening or women as well, and you're thinking, no, I need to stop this crying thing. No, don't do that. You're taking something beautiful away from you. I mean, you really are. Now, I don't cry much anymore. I mean, it's pretty rare now that I do. Now I can look back and actually smile on the memories and things like that. It's not, oh, woe is me. And I also, too, take comfort, Tina, knowing that she is, at least, my Christian faith tells me she is fully healed and restored. And she's doing great. And I think she's happy that I'm doing better now because, like I said, I'm sure she was like, oh, honey, can you please try and get better? Can you please try and get better? But it's a process. It's a process we all have to go through.
And when you say get better, what does that mean? And get better and compared to what?
Okay. This is really good. This is something, because you and I have talked to a lot of widowers and widows. The one thing that I always tell people, it's kind of a hot button for me is, well, you got to get over it and get going. I'm like, no. I don't get over it. I learn to move forward, put one foot in front of the other. That's what I have learned how to do. That's what I've progressively gotten better at, is moving forward one step at a time. And that's what it takes. I mean, like I can remember going to restaurants by myself. It was hard, but I made myself go. I knew I needed to do that. Pam and I, we used to hike all the time. Was it hard going by myself? You bet it was. I'd sometimes see the shadow in front of me and go, oh, I wish I could see her shadow too. But I didn't. But I kept going. I didn't isolate myself. And that's part of healing and getting better. You're not going to get better just sitting inside these four walls and staring at them all day. It's like my 97-year-old adopted grandmother Lola told me before she passed. She said, Jack, she says, you can throw all the pity parties you want, but nobody wants to come. And that's a reality. That's a hard thing to hear, but boy, it is so true. It really is.
You mentioned something, Jack, about doing the hard things versus isolation. Have you found that people have convinced themselves that isolation is safe? I'm in my protected space, and going out doing all those hard things makes my grief worse. If so, what do those conversations look like as you've spoken to so many widowed and widowers?
Yeah, I mean, women especially, I'll hear them say, oh, no, I can never go to a restaurant by myself, or, oh, no, I can never take a vacation by myself. Only men can do that. What's funny is, though, I remember my first trip I took was just a few weeks after I lost Pam. I decided to go hiking in Utah. And what's funny is I met 3 single women who were widowed who were hiking too, who'd gotten out there. And I asked them, I said, how does it feel? They go, I feel like I'm alive for a while. They said, I'm really sad when I go back to the hotel and my husband's not there. But they said, I just feel alive being outdoors. And I said, do you share this with other women? And they would tell me a couple. I remember one in particular, she was from New York City. She was a young widow. She was maybe 31, 32 years old. And she says she was in a grief share group. And she goes, I tried to tell them, convince them that if you would just go outside, you will feel better. Trust me. And she says they were so scared to go outside the doors. And, but it was beautiful to run into people that did do it. And I would run into me. That was the thing I found too. When I would get out, I tell people, I almost had widar, radar, but it was widar. I could sense.
That must be a term you coined. I have never heard of widar.
No, I'm telling you, I'm convinced. And my kids said I had widar. I could be in a crowded restaurant, spot somebody, and I could go, I bet they lost their spouse. And I would go over and start a conversation with them. 99% of the time, I was right. When I was on these hikes, I would strike up these conversations. It would be a widower. I remember I was in the Badlands of South Dakota. The guy at the entrance there, he said, what brings you to the Badlands? And I said, well, I'm trying to be out here and hike. I said, this is something my wife and I love to do. And I said, I'm going to keep doing it. He goes, man, I just lost my wife about 6 weeks ago. I said, well, let me pull over the car. I pulled over the car, parked, and we went in his little guard hut and we talked for about an hour. It just opened up so many people to me. It really, really did. And it made a difference in my life, like you're doing here, sharing those stories, sharing those experiences. and knowing that we weren't alone on this walk. Because, there's always going to be the guy or girl that that goes, "Oh, I know how you feel. My dog died." I'm like, no, not even close. Not even close. Or my favorite aunt died. It's not to diminish their loss. Not at all. But when you lose a spouse, I mean, this from experience, it is life-changing, altering. It really is. I mean, it just is. And and that's where I always say too, losing Pam, hardest thing ever in my life. But it has made me a better person. It has made me more aware. It just did. My life, is it better? Some aspects, yeah, especially on my empathy for others and giving and things like that. It truly changed me.
Thank you for sharing that, because when you're in 6 weeks of this, it's incomprehensible that life would be anything different than what you're experiencing. If you were to talk to yourself, Jack, have kept all the things you've learned, and you could talk to you the day after Pam passed, what would you tell yourself?
I would probably say, I know you're in a deep, dark hole right now, and you feel like you're grabbing on the walls of this hole, and there's no possible way you can get out of that hole. I would tell me, as hard as you may think it is to believe, you will be able to grab the sides of that hole, and you will make your way up. And one day you'll actually get above the darkness and be back in the light.
Is it time alone, or are there actions that require that climbing process? I see having to do different things for that to go, not because some people say time heals all wounds. Do you think there's truth in that, or is what you do during the time?
No, it's what you do during the time. If you just sit there and wait for it to get better, it's not going to happen. I never forget, I met a young pastor in Oregon, and he meant well. I never forget, he told me, he says, from what I've seen, usually most people start to get better around 6 months. And I just asked him, I said, have you ever lost a spouse? He goes, no. I said, trust me, it's more than 6 months. You might want to revise that number, because it is. Now there have been a few people that I've heard of who made what appeared to be a quick turnaround, but in my opinion, again, just my opinion, you got to give it time. You got to give it time. Don't jump right into a relationship. Don't trying to see people and looking for that next spouse. That's not good. And I've run into a couple of those people, and most of the time it didn't quite work out because you need the time. And I'm glad I took a lot of time before I decided to do that part of life again.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that, because I think there is the thought that men just get married right away and they're not sad about it.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've heard people say that, but I've met enough male widowers to say that's not the case. The men I've met. I mean, there was one guy I know who he got married pretty fast, but he's still married and seems real happy. It was a girlfriend he'd known from high school. So I think maybe that was a little different. And she also knew his wife. But I've met a lot of men who have struggled and taken their time, and made it back. They've made it to the light again, but they took time, and it took me time.
Wow. What are some things that worked for you in that time? I know you talked about forcing yourself to go outside to do activities. Were there other things that you found that were helpful for you coming back to the light?
Yeah, I mean, I did. Well, first of all, too, in hindsight, sometimes I think I should have taken more time off from work. But basically, I took 4 days off because the TV station, it's like, this is so silly. I was like, well, I don't want to be a burden to the other meteorologists on staff. I was the weeknight guy, so the weekend guys having to fill in for me, the morning person's having to fill in for it. I'm thinking, I got to get back. And I got back, and so people watching at home, they're like, oh, he seems great, because I knew how to do it. I could put on the happy face, but also
the mask.
Yeah, the mask. But my first night back, the station they said, if you want to take a couple of minutes and kind of share with the audience. And I did. And that's actually on YouTube now. They posted it, what I said and did. And that was helpful to be able to discuss her. And I showed pictures and I talked about the loss. And then I got back in the routine of doing the weather. And that was a good thing. But then 6 months later, COVID hit. And then we all went into lockdown. And the TV station, I was doing 5 newscasts a night, and every newscast was so depressing. And I'm going to tell you, that then became really hard being Mr. Happy doing the weather with all this terrible news and going through my grief. And the only way I made it through, and now I think, 6, 7 years post-COVID, I'm fine saying this, I broke a lot of rules because I had to. I didn't wear the mask all the time I was supposed to because it made me feel confined and back in that hole and things like that. And Oregon had some of the strictest standards in the nation. I mean, they told us on hiking trails we were supposed to wear a mask. And I didn't because I had to get out. One good thing about being in Oregon, the only good thing about being in Oregon during COVID was I had amazing hiking trail opportunities.
And there was so much we didn't know about COVID. There was so much people finding out, and as it goes along. And to all the people that are listening to this conversation and your loved one passed during COVID, and you were not able to have conventional ways of celebrating their life and grief, that impacted your grief in a way that we are still trying to research and understand how that has impacted you and your family. Yeah. And my heart goes out to you in that loss. Definitely.
I mean, it was just, like I said, you had widows and widowers that lost, they couldn't have a service for them. They couldn't do anything. So the outdoors, again, saved me during COVID. I mean, it really, really did. Now, other thing, you asked about what other things did you do? Well, as time went on, I'm a huge sports fan. I went to Oregon State football when they returned to play. I went to basketball games. The movies was that may have been harder than anything I had to do. Going to the movies was super, super hard. And the reason being, I basically forced Pam, carried her to the car and took her to the movies like 5 days before she passed. And she was out of it the whole time. I mean, because again, I'm still in this, she's going to snap out of it. She wasn't. So I did have some, you might call it trauma. First time I went to the movies, I had those thoughts about why did you put her in a wheelchair and take her to the movie theater a week before she passes? Why would you do that? And then I had to realize, eventually I had to let go of that guilt and trauma and go, I was just doing the best I could. And now, of course, I can go to the movies without a problem. But that was one. But I just tried to stay actively engaged. I didn't give up any of the activities that Pam and I did after her. I tried to continue, like golf. We golfed together all the time. I'm going to tell you what I did, though. I would still play golf, but you know what? I kept what's called a double scorecard. I would have her name and my name, and I would hit 2 balls and pretend she was playing with me. I did that for about 6 months. And the golf club where I would play, they were so nice. I didn't want to be paired with anybody. I just wanted to play by myself. They understood what I was going through, and they would let me do that. And one day, Tina, this is actually a great story. I was on the 7th hole. It's there in Medford, Oregon, small municipal course. And the course ranger pulled up. That's the guy who patrols the course. And he says, "You playing for Pam today?" And I go, "Yep, just as always." So I hit my shot. It was a par 3. And I'm an okay golfer, and I got it on the green. Then I hit the second shot, which was Pam's. Okay. The ball rolled up on the green, and I lost sight of the ball. And the ranger goes, "It's in the hole." I went, "No." He goes, "It's a hole in one." I went, "Good, it was Pam's ball." He rides because I walked. He raced his cart up to go to the hole. He's jumping up and down. He's more excited than I am, I think. He's going, "It's in, it's in, it's in." And he goes, "You know what?" He says, "We're putting this on our board," because they put people's holes in ones. He says, "We're putting it up there that Pam Church got a hole in one on this course." And after I did that, though, I stopped playing two balls and started just playing golf normal again because I'm like, okay, that's good. Not going to get any better than that.
You know, thank you for sharing that story, Jack. And the other thing that I love about that, there are some things that we do for a while that when the time is right, it just no longer serves us. I can relate to that. My late husband and I were in the military. So there was a Red Lobster near the base, and we would go there for one of our birthdays and our wedding anniversary. And when Mark passed, I have gone back to Red Lobster every year for his birthday. And this year, as I was eating, I felt like, I think I'm done with this. I don't think I don't think it suits me any longer. But for the time that it did, it was amazing. And I think that's helpful for people as they're going through their grief journey. They may find that this one particular activity is extremely helpful, but in time it may shift, and you don't have to force yourself to keep doing the thing you used to do because it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I'll tell you something I did for Pam's birthday for about the first 3 years. I don't do it anymore. The first year, I was living in Phoenix because I'd now left television. I'd moved to Phoenix, and I had these. I was looking and say I can't find one here. I've had them. I had these baseball cards made up with Pam's picture, and it said "Happy Birthday." I then bought 25 Happy Birthday cards. I put her little baseball card in it, and I put a $5 gift card to this local coffee shop called Hava Java in Phoenix. They'd gotten to know me. And I said, okay, her birthday is coming up. I said, I want you to give every customer, the first 25 customers, one of these birthday cards with the $5 gift card and tell them it's her birthday. And they said, do you want to be here? I said, no, I don't want to be here. I said, I'll just be at home. You guys, they ended up, this little coffee shop, they put some balloons up, happy birthday balloons, and they gave out those cards. And people then found the backstory, and they would seek me out at the coffee shop because I went there all the time and tell me how sweet they thought that was, everything. But what it did was, and then I did another one. I did one at Chick-fil-A, kind of the same thing. And what I found was, and I bet you did too, is those first few years, a lot of people say, oh, I dread the birthday. I would look forward to the birthday because it's like, well, what am I going to plan this year? I would do that. And I did the same thing on our anniversary. I went to a restaurant called 52 Seasons there in Phoenix. And I reserved a table for two. And I made them do a place setting for two. And I told them it was four. And ends up then they comped the entire dinner. And then they gave glasses of champagne to people in the restaurant. I didn't do it for that, but it made it fun. And it's funny doing this show with you. I've forgotten some of those things over the years that kind of stuff got me through it. Yeah. I had to learn, don't dread those special days. Just make them special if you can. And like you said, then after a while, now the dates are still with me, but I don't place a big emphasis on them or anything like that now.
I find that trying to push it down, trying to hide your emotions takes more energy than just celebrating, leaning in, and talking about them. Yeah. You mentioned that you've spoken to so many widows and widowers. And tell us a little bit more about your YouTube channel and your Widowdar and how you're connecting with people and how that worked for you.
Well, it started off as I'd met a friend of mine. He became a friend. His name was Jim. They're in Medford. And he had worked with some grief sharing groups, and he had lost his wife, but then he had remarried. What was funny about this was we had a Christmas party when we first moved to Medford, Oregon, where Pam invited the entire neighborhood. We didn't even know anybody in this neighborhood. We had like 60 people at our house just showing up, dropping in for this Christmas party. I didn't know it at the time, but Jim and his new wife at that time were at our house that night. So when he heard through television that my wife, he reached out to me, and ended up he'd been involved. So we got together, and I kind of lost my train of thought. Anyway, so he knew I was struggling, and he said, "Have you thought about writing a letter to her?" And I said, "Yeah." So I created a Facebook page called Love Letters to Pam. Every day I would write just my raw emotions, what I was feeling, what I was going through, blah, 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 and I'd post it. People started picking up on it. Well, then a buddy of mine, he goes, you're in television. He says, why don't you start a podcast and just start, instead of just having the letter, also talk about it. So I started doing videos. And before I know it, there's, in today's YouTube world, it's not that big, but I get a few thousand people, watching these videos and commenting, and then they would connect on the other one. And it just became, and I found that it was healing for me to talk about these things. I ended up producing, I looked the other day, the channel is still there, but it's been rebranded, but I now have a playlist of grief videos. The channel now is called Life with Jack and Nicole, which we'll probably get into that later. But there's a playlist of over 300 grief share videos. And I still occasionally will do one, not a lot. I'll do something. And so that's kind of what led to that. Well, then, though, these letters, I had a friend of mine in the publishing business. He goes, you should turn this into a book. He said, this might be good. But I just didn't have the strength to it. I would look back at the letters after, because I kept them for 1 year. I did 1 year of always doing the letter. And I'm probably jumping ahead, but what evolved into the book was my current wife, my new wife, which we'll talk about it later. Nicole said,
"Oh no, we're here now. Let's talk." No. So,
okay.
Who is Nicole? How did we meet? And let's just jump right in there.
Well, Nicole, I was going to tell you, was instrumental in actually putting the book together. I mean, she took those letters and put it together, had it published, and that's what it looks like. It's a cool book. It's called Year One of Grief. And it's my letters. And I find that I go back and I read them now and I go, this is actually pretty good stuff. And I'm thinking, I kind of wish I could have had this book, because, reading it. But yeah.
Is the Facebook page still open or is that closed now?
It is, but I don't do much with it anymore. The book, though, you can get it on Amazon. It's just called Year One of Grief by me. The YouTube channel, though, is very active. We keep it going. You asked about Nicole. I met Nicole, was about 4 or 5 years later, 4 years later after I lost Pam. I met her in church in Phoenix. She's was a younger Black woman from Kenya. She kind of stood out, and I kind of stood out. I'm like this guy who's always by himself at church, and I saw her in the back of the church by herself. And and I say it was a God thing. The Sunday, do you want me to tell you how I met her? That's the first time?
Yes, we need to know.
Okay, all right, okay. So I saw her back there. I'd seen her before, and I'm in my mind going, okay, I want to go meet her. It wasn't anything romantic, anything like that. It's just like, I want to meet her. She's by herself like me. I want to see what her story is. And on that particular Sunday, one of the few Sundays, Pastor Chris decides to come down and talk to me after the service. And I'm watching at the back. I'm watching for her. I'm like, I really got to get out of here. I want to go meet her. And she disappeared. And I'm like, oh, great. So I go out to this little courtyard area we have. It's beautiful. There's cactus and palm trees there. And I sit down in the seat. And I'm like, well, thanks, God. I'm really wanting to meet that woman back there. I said, I guess I'll just go play golf again or go hiking, do my usual Sunday thing alone. And then, like magic, she comes walking through the garden. And I'm like, hey, I wanted to meet you. And she goes, me? I said, yeah. And she had kind of a funny accent. And I said, where are you from? She goes, I'm from Kenya. I went, wow. I said, I'm not sure I've met anybody from Kenya. I go, have you been coming to church here long? She says, no, this is 3 or 4 times. I said, yes, I thought I'd say I'm Jack. She says, I'm Nicole. And she says, I said, so how do you like it here? She goes, well, I'm kind of adjusting to the heat. And I went, well, it's not humid. She goes, yeah, people tell me that. I said, but you know what? I said, if you get in your car, you can go an hour north of here and be at 5,000 feet and 30 degrees cooler. I said, you should just hop in your car and go to the mountains. She goes, oh, I don't have a car. And I'm like, well, how do you get to church? She goes, well, I take an Uber. I'm like, well, you don't have to take an Uber. I said, I can give you a ride to church. I said, I come by myself. She goes, really? You do that? And I went, sure, where are you? Well, it ended up, she used to work in the high-tech world in Kenya, but she came to America with a backpack, came here with a backpack. And she took a job in healthcare. She lived on site in this high-end healthcare facility, what we call a show home, a really fancy house in Scottsdale, housed about 6 or 7 residents. She worked 6 days a week, 16-hour shifts. She lived on site in a little room there. I mean, this is a college-educated woman that used to do tech startups doing this now. And so she told me where it was. I said, look, from now on, I'll pick you up and bring you. I said, you don't even have to take Uber home. I said, is there someplace you'd like to go today? Have you seen any of the area? She said, well, I only have 1 day off a week. I said, well, look, I said, have you been to Fashion Square Mall? I said, it's got like Prada and all these fancy stores and all. She goes, no. I said, would you like to go there today? She's like, you do that? I said, sure, I'll take you. And she goes, well, look, I'm going to stay there, though. You can just drop me off. And I said, okay, that's fine. You know, I'll take you and drop you off. And I did. And we both laughed about it now. This woman who just met me gets in the car with some guy. She has no idea who he is.
Right.
But I drive her to the Fashion Square Mall. Long story short, every Sunday then I would pick her up. Sunday afternoons, we would have what we called an American adventure. We would do hiking. We would go, I took her to an IKEA. She thought that was the most unbelievable place she'd ever seen.
It is complicated.
We went on all these adventures. We'd go have lunch, and then we'd go on these adventures. Then I'd get her back so she could sleep and begin her shift and whatever. And over time, I knew there was something going on between us. I could feel it. Now, she also had a daughter, a 10-year-old daughter who was still in Kenya, who she was working on bringing here. And we talked about her a lot. And then one day, I kept telling her, I said, you really probably should be with maybe a younger black guy. I said, I don't know if you ought to be hanging out with me all the time. So I would try and find her a boyfriend. I would try and find her somebody.
Okay.
And I finally did find somebody. And he would take her out on Sunday night after I took her home, Sunday afternoon. Well, something though clicked in me. After they got out 2 or 3 times, I started thinking, what is this, God? I'm not comfortable with her seeing this other guy on Sunday evenings.
Sounds like a repeat. Pam had somebody and you like, no, that's not going to work. And now I see Nicole, you thought, and then that's not going to work.
Yeah, there is a pattern. So I called Nicole. I said, is there any way you could break off from work for an hour tomorrow morning and we could have breakfast? She goes, okay. I said, well, I'll pick you up. So we went to this little coffee house. We're sitting there. And she says, what's up? I said, look, I said, I know this is totally wrong. I said, I shouldn't be with anybody else. I should just be single and alone the rest of my life. And I said, I know I'm getting ahead of myself, but I said, you seeing this other guy? I said, it's not sitting well with me. She goes, well, what do you mean? I went and she's setting me up. Now I'm like, I said, I'm just not comfortable with it. And she goes, well, why? I went, look, I said, all right, fine. I think I fell in love with you. And I said, I'm really sorry. I know I shouldn't do that. She goes, really? I went, yeah. She goes, well, I've been in love with you for a couple of months now, and you just wanted me to go out with these goofy guys, so I did. And so we then expressed our love for one another, and we then got married about 4 months later. But now before we got married, though, I insisted we have premarital counseling with our pastor. And it was Chris. Pastor Chris, remember, who delayed me in getting to meet her.
Right.
And I never forget the first meeting we had with him. We went in, and I'm still like, this probably isn't right. I go into it, me, Nicole, and Pastor Chris. And I go, okay, Pastor Chris. I said, let me go ahead and tell you, I know this doesn't look right. I'm older, she's younger, she's black, I'm white, she's Kenyan, I'm America. We don't fit inside the box. We shouldn't get married. And he just looks at me and he goes, you are missing the point, aren't you? And Nicole's over there just shaking her head. And he goes, you're exactly what God wants. He doesn't want people inside that box. He goes, yeah. He says, people may look, they may ask questions. You guys may be different. But he goes, you're showing that love has no boundaries inside a box. He goes, go with it. Enjoy it. Live your life. And so we got married a few months later, and it changed my life. It was just, she has been such a blessing. I'll say, yes, she says I was a blessing for her. A few months ago, we finally got our daughter here. We moved from Phoenix to Huntsville, Alabama. And the reason for that was Nicole said, how am I going to get to know your family. My kids ended up, even though we raised from the West Coast, they both ended up in Nashville.
Okay.
She says, she says, I want to get to know your family. I want to know your background. She says, I want to know more about you. I can't do it if we're living in Phoenix. And I didn't want to leave Phoenix, but she was right. We came here. Everyone is, even what's funny too, Tina, is our friends that Pam and I had over the years, they have become, those couples are our friends now too.
Oh, that's
We
beautiful.
all just come together. And Lexi has just been so, I had a friend of mine, I'll never forget, I started panicking before we got married. I said, to my friend Larry, I called him in Austin, Texas. I said, Larry, I said, I don't know though. I said, what about this me being a dad again? I said, I just got my kids out of the house and they're on their own. And now I'm going to raise a little girl. And he goes, well, what else you got to do? You know, and it has been a blessing. And we truly are happy. Are there differences? Yeah, but they're also good. It's just been such an incredible journey. And I think what it is too, the message I would have to other people is, even though I always thought there was no more room in my heart to love and it would be wrong to love, our hearts are capable of far more than we could ever imagine. I mean, Nicole and I both talk about, we were two broken people who came together. I mean, because our daughter's dad basically disappeared when he found out Nicole was pregnant. So Nicole put herself, she, raised her daughter and herself and paid her way through college and did all these amazing things. And she's an incredibly strong woman. And she always reminds me so much about the blessings we have. She's made me so thankful for what we have. And now she works in ministry at a church. She didn't want, because I had her quit that job where she worked 16 hours a day, 6 days a week. And she was so scared to quit that job though too, because she kept telling me, she goes, but what if you're not around? What if you leave me? I went, baby, that's not happening. I said to my family, I had to tell her how my grandparents were both married 60 plus years.
Wow.
My parents 50 plus years. I said, I was married. I said, we don't walk out on our wives. I said, it's not going to happen. And when she finally got peace about that, because she'd been so disappointed in life. Her dad left her family when she was a kid. Then the guy was the daughter to her, he disappeared. And she became comfortable with that. And she took a year off from work after we got married, just to rest and reflect and figure out what she's going to do with her life. And then she felt a calling to ministry. She now is director of preschool curriculum in a church here. And she loves it. And she's looking to do more things. And we have our daughter with us. And I know we're kind of steering off, but I want to tell you just a quick, simple story about being thankful. The other day, she said the sweetest thing to me. I was like, I said, Lexi could ride the bus home every now and then because we're like a mile from the school. And she goes, oh, no. I said, but isn't it kind of a pain? You have to go pick her up. And sometimes I'll pick her up. I said, you could relax. You don't have to go pick her up. She goes, no. She says, when I lived in Kenya, she says, I can remember when we would go to the school, they would take like public transportation. She'd ride with her and then she'd go to her office. She'd go, I thought that was the most beautiful thing when I get to see. She says, Kenya's not a wealthy country, Nairobi, but she goes, there's some families. She goes, I'd see these moms who drove their own car and dropped their child off at school. And she said, I want to do that one day. I want to be able to drive my daughter to school and drop her off. I mean, just think about that. I mean, we as Americans we don't think about those little things. And that's where she has changed my life so much to appreciate things again. It really is. And you never know who's going to cross your path. I never forget. I used to kid her at first. I said, I always went to church there hoping I'd find a younger black woman from Kenya. And she'd go, well, actually, I was always thinking I'd find an older, rich white man from Scottsdale. And I said, well, you got the older guy from Scottsdale, but he sure ain't rich. And I'm not. But what's funny about all that, and I know it was in God's plans, remember I mentioned my 97-year-old adopted grandmother.
Yes.
She's passed away. Her name was Lola. Before Lola passed, and before I ever met Nicole, Lola told me one day, I was visiting her. She goes, have you thought about seeing anybody? I said, oh, no, Lola, I'm not going to do that. She goes, Jack, you're too young to give up on life right now. And she says, you're way too social to just sit by yourself. She goes, here's what I'm going to tell you, though. She goes, don't go out there looking for the 48-year-old widower from Chicago that you think is the right match. She goes, I think God is going to send you someone who is totally different from anything you could ever imagine. And she says, let your heart and mind be open to the possibilities of something different. And she goes, also, I want to tell you this. She goes, we all loved Pam dearly. And she says, you would want this for Pam if it was reversed. And I look back on it now and I think about that. If I'd been the first one to go, and let's say Pam had met a younger man from Kenya, but he made her happy, I would say amen and hallelujah to that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Jack, for the person that's listening to this conversation and the idea of hoping, the idea of life could be different than what they're doing today, and you bumped into them in the grocery store because you got that widowed hour going on, what would you tell them?
I would say always, again, what Lo said, keep your heart and mind open to possibilities. Don't get locked into this box that I did there for a while, that it's got to be this way, that you're somehow not being loyal to your spouse who you lost if you decide to laugh every now and then, or if you decide to go out for coffee with someone, or if you decide to go beyond a coffee date and have a real date. But now don't rush it. And I always tell people too, not everybody is going to be built to have someone else. You know, you may not remarry, and that's okay too. But just don't cut yourself off. Have conversations. Don't be afraid to talk to people. Don't be afraid. And, you know, that's funny, though, too. I used to run into, it seemed a lot of women were really apprehensive about even meeting or talking to somebody because they always seem to think, well, the guy's got an agenda. And I'm sure there are people out there like that, but the vast majority of people that I ever met were very nice, very encouraging, and probably got tired of my stories, but they let me tell them anyway.
Jack, this has been really good. I try to give my guests an opportunity to be the podcast host. This is probably light work for you, but do you have any questions of me?
Well, one thing I didn't know, how did you ever find me? I think you may have told me, but I don't remember. How did I pop up?
It was on YouTube and seeing the videos and then doing a little bit of research and a little bit of investigation and then finding where you were now.
Okay. Yeah. If you Google my name, a few things do pop up. So most of them are okay. There is that thing. No, we're not going to get into that. So.
And I find, and also there are not enough men that I can find willing to share their story and give other men an opportunity to hear what this can look like potentially, and just being able to share the emotional depth of this experience. And you were willing to do that, and I wanted to bring your voice to this platform so other men could continue to hear that.
Wow, I'm really happy you did this. And I'll be honest, leading up this interview, I told Nicole, I said, I don't know, do I really want to share these stories again? And it's like, she's like, no, you should do this. I mean, she is my biggest cheerleader.
Awesome.
And so, I mean, I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity, because you are right. Not enough guys talk about it, or they want to insulate themselves. I mean, and guys too, there's some that would do this too, say some of the stupidest things. I mean, I never forget, one final story. I was on a golf course again one time, and this was less than a year after I'd lost Pam. I never forget, I ran into this guy at the golf course, and he'd seen on television, because again, I was a pretty public figure there, knew what had happened. He comes up, he goes, hey man, sorry to hear about your old lady. And I went, whoa. I said, please don't call her my old lady. Her name was Pam. And I said, I loved her dearly. He goes, oh, my bad. He goes, but hey, one thing, he says, I was thinking about it the other day. He goes, guess you can play golf anytime you want now. She's not here. And I'm like, you just don't get it, do you? He goes, yeah, I've been divorced. I'm like, no, I said, you don't get it. I said, but I'm going to give you some grace. I told her, I said, I'm going to give you some grace. You don't understand. But I said, don't say those two things you just said to anybody else that's ever lost their spouse, whether it's a man or a woman. And he just kind of shook his head and walked away. Because we all know, and I know you've had other guests on, people can say some really stupid things. And sometimes it's hard to hold your tongue.
We all hear the stupid things. What are some things that you think people can say?
I think the one thing I wish people would do, and I try and do, I know you do it. Anybody would meet somebody that's lost somebody is, well, what was their name? Tell me about them. What did you enjoy? It's like people always want to avoid talking about the person you lost, when those of us who've lost somebody, that's what we want to do. So ask away. That's what we want people to do. Talk about them. Don't be scared. And then we'll talk about other stuff too, but it gives us kind of a gateway. You never know. You may have had something in common with my wife.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would agree.
Yeah.
Jack, I want to say thank you for this conversation, and thank Nicole too, since she made this happen. She made the book happen. She made the conversation happen. If you would wrap up this conversation, let the people that have been here with us know more about your book, your YouTube channel, how they can reach out to you, and anything you feel like you want to wrap up this discussion with.
Okay, well, that's very nice of you to do that. The book, and so books are tough. I mean, because there's so many of them out there. But I really would like to see it get into the hands of a few people, because, like I said, on second read, it's like, this is actually decent. And it's not because I wrote it, but that's what it looks like. It's on Amazon. It's called Year One of Grief. It says, My First Year Journey After Losing the Love of My Life. And it's by me, and I'm Jack Church. You can get it in paperback, or if you have, I think it's called Kindle Unlimited, you can get it for free on Kindle Unlimited. And if you just want to get the what they call it, the e-version, it's like $3. It's not much. That's really good. And then the YouTube channel, like I said, has been rebranded. It's called Life with Jack and Nicole, but there are playlists there. And if you go to the playlist, there's one about the loss of a spouse. And last time I looked, if you want to just get crazy, there's 304 videos I put on there. So you can look at those. And if you want to see what life's like between Nicole and I, we've done some videos. She doesn't like to do them as much, but we have. And Alexandra, Lexi, our daughter, we try not to expose her too much, but she's there. And then if you want to contact me, I do have an email address that's set up for that. It's called thejackchurchshow@yahoo.com. That's the easy way to do it. If all else fails, if you just Google Jack Church Widow, stuff will come up. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. I love what you're doing. Because it's a lot of work, what you're doing. My full-time job, I'm doing my real job. I wish I had more time to devote to what you're doing and what we could do, but I just don't. So I'm glad there are people out there like you who are helping share these stories. And I know that you're like me. You got out of the hole.
Yes.
You found the light, right? Would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Definitely. Hey, I will ask you this, because you had a question. One thing I've told people, I've said, I think if my wife Pam were to meet Nicole, they would be the best of friends. I just see that in them. I'm wondering, how about you?
Yes, and that at first seemed really odd to me. I was like, in a different time zone, a different connection, I could see the similarities that they have, that they would enjoy each other's company. Yeah, they have similar interests. And what was super just blew my mind. My current husband, his middle name is my late husband's first name.
And what is that?
Mark.
Mark. Wow.
And when he told me his middle name, I was like, okay, I'm going to have to breathe from him. I'm going to need to take this in and understand what's going on here. And there was a sense of assurance in that.
It's funny you say that, because Nicole and I just today were talking about hers and Pam's birthdays are both in May.
Oh, wow.
And then Nicole, my daughter from my first marriage, our daughter's middle name is Nicole. So kind of like you, there's these, and I don't think they're just chance things.
I know they're affirmations, because I wondered, I was like, okay, was to get married or to date. How does that work after being with this man for 32 years? How will someone else become this most best person, closest in my life? And it's just been so seamless. It wasn't even an effort. I mean, there were a lot of send back to the sea kind of things going on that weren't a good match. But from the moment I met Fred, I was like, this feels like home. Like, wow. Like, I was like, okay, have you been alone too long? Like, I need you to check yourself, what's going on. And I was like, I need to reel this in. And it is now 7, 8 years later, and this still feels like home. I could not have imagined. I thought if I would have been in another relationship, it'd be like we're more friends. But this level, I feel like I love Fred in a different way than I love Mark, because I know how precious life is. And I know how short it can be. That I would probably say I love him more than I did because of what I've learned. And I'm a better wife from what I learned being married to Mark and bringing that into this relationship.
Ooh, I think that's powerful, because I think too, I was telling Nicole the other day, one thing too, I feel like giving a second chance on this being a dad part, I'm doing better on that because I had some training.
Right.
You know, and on the marriage side, it's unique too in the fact that Nicole's a good bit younger than me. You know, people that look us up will see that. And we talk about how I'm kind of on the tail end of my professional career. I'll do other things. And she's kind of mid-career and heading up. But that's also been kind of fun to watch. And because she'll ask me a lot of questions about things.
Okay.
And she goes, well, you've been there, had the life experience. And so that's kind of fun too. It's the differences have challenges, but they're good too. And she levels me. She levels me so well. I mean, I will say too, that's where she's a little stronger than Pam. I can kind of push Pam around a little bit. No, I'm not pushing Nicole around.
We need to have a conversation with Nicole about dating a widower. We'll have to see how that could go.
Okay.
She may have some tips. Ask her.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. We can be in touch. We'll see how that works. I think she might have popped through, but she's staying out of the way right now. So.
Okay. Well, Jack, thank you so much for this time. And I'll let you give the closing comments in this conversation.
Well, it's just been an incredible pleasure. And I do hope that people out there have heard us say that while it does seem really dark for you, maybe, there is light. That old saying, there's light at the end of the tunnel. I don't like the part end of the tunnel. It's not the end of the tunnel, but there's just light outside that darkness. And there's always the joke about walk towards the light, you know? And I would say in this case, definitely walk towards the light, because it's not the end.
Thank you.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune in to Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.